Okay, hi everyone. Dr. Isela Garcia of Alesi Group here. And I would like to chat a little bit about big emotions, particularly sadness with children. Now, before I begin that, I hope everyone is doing well. I want to let you know that I have an upcoming session in Chino Valley. And I believe it's not obviously not tomorrow, Saturday, but next Saturday. So I'm excited about that. So I hope to see you if you're willing to take the drive or if you're in that region. I'm looking forward to that session. It will be supercharged and social emotional development supercharged. And what that means is that I do a lot of work around social emotional development. This particular session is kind of like the best of the best, and it's only a 1-day session. But I do my best to try to help you really think through some of the more challenging situations. But we have to start with some foundational elements that sometimes we have to explore, we have to engage in, just because it sets, again, the foundation for our work throughout the entire day. So there may be some replication if you have been to any of my other sessions about those foundational core beliefs, but we need that. And of course, I always say this, I'm sure you didn't memorize all of it the very first time you saw a session or were with me during one of my trainings. So I look forward to seeing all of you. I also want to do a shout out to Alesi Group. We spent the day together. Tomorrow is my birthday, and so we did sort of a birthday celebration, and so that was lovely, and just thank you to them. They all work so incredibly hard to do the very best that we can possibly do. What's amazing about our group is that each one of us has such a core commitment to best practices, and we each believe wholeheartedly in the work that we do. We and I think it's evident, there's integrity in the work we do because we believe it with every bit of who we are. And so they are incredibly committed to doing incredible work. And so I just want to say thank you to them. And, I couldn't do this work alone. I know that. So thank you to them. So I'm trying to think if I had any other announcements I wanted to make. And if not, then I'll go ahead and get started. So I want to talk a little bit about today, sadness. And let me tell you, I spend a lot of time talking about challenging behaviors because that's often what teachers feel a little bit uncertain about. Not a little bit. It's the topic of conversation anytime people approach me or, in sessions, people want to just chat about a particular kid or chat about a circumstance or chat about challenging behavior and what do I do and did I do this right? Even their own children, because it's such a difficult topic because every child, every situation, every circumstance really is unique. And so there isn't a one way to approach things. And that's what makes it so challenging when folks, approach me and say, I have this child and this is what happened. And it's very hard to give very specific suggestions because every child is unique in terms of who they are, their personality, their culture, their family influences, your relationship with the child. It's all so unique. And so it's very difficult to give sort of a one way to do things. Having said that, let's talk about sadness. Children experience sadness throughout the day. And sadness, and I will tell you that from the very beginning of a day when a child comes to school, during that drop-off transition, children experience sadness. During the classroom time, maybe the child doesn't want to go to circle time. Maybe the child is tired. Maybe the child is just having one of those days where they just not feeling so great and they are experiencing sadness. They're crying. They may be on the floor. I was actually at a restaurant earlier today, and there was a 2-year-old who was like lying across the floor crying, and what people would consider a tantrum. And of course you get that, those judgment, right? I talk about judgment all the time. Right away, people are turning around going, my child would never do that. And, this is what I would do with him. And, he's misbehaving. And, we start to create all this judgment about a child who is experiencing distress. And so then throughout, as the day progresses, we may have a child who is sad because there's a conflict between that child and another child. Maybe there's sadness because they want to stay outside and it's time to come inside. Maybe they don't want to go to nap time and there's sadness around that. So children, sadness is, I think, an emotion that happens throughout the day for some children. And it's often something I watch very closely on how the adults support children who are experiencing sadness. And how we, one of the things that I believe so wholeheartedly, and there's research to support this, is that we teach children how to be supportive and emotionally engaging with others by how we are with them. So, and let me kind of explain that a little bit further. One of the things that I see with toddlers, and I see this with parents and I see this with teachers alike, but it's a really good example of what I'm trying to convey. With young children, so I'm talking infants and toddlers, let's say they're going to a childcare program and they want to be with mom, and mom is dropping the baby off. And so mom hands baby over to the teacher, and the teacher, takes baby, and mom kisses the baby and says goodbye. And the baby is distressed, or the toddler is distressed, and she starts to cry. Now, she's crying because she wants to be with her mom. That's a very real emotion. And being with mom, she's my person. She's my caregiver. She's the one who loves me and who I love. Not that I don't love you as a teacher, but that's my mom. And we often will go, shh, it's okay. You're okay. You're okay. You're okay. Your mommy's going to be back. You're okay. And then we take an object like a rattle or something. And what do I have in front of me? A pen. And we rattle it in front of the baby. And we go, shh, and we rattle it in front of the baby. And we try to distract them. And I've seen teachers take the child and walk over to like the window and show them something that's outside, or bring them over to a toy and just try to distract them because we want them to not feel sadness. And I know that can come from a very, from a good place, that you don't want the child to have that experience of feeling sadness. And so you're trying to distract them so that they no longer feel that. Now, so that's the picture. Okay. That's the picture. Now I want to look at it from an adult perspective. Okay. So from an adult perspective, let's say something pretty significant happened in your life, because you have to remember that what children are experiencing in that moment is as significant as something happening in our adult lives. And we tend to minimize it. We tend to think that it's not a big deal, that they'll get over it. But those emotions are very real to both us as adults and to children. And one of our biggest mistakes is that we just kind of foo-foo it. We kind of think that it's like not a big deal. And so if you were having a very difficult experience, let's say at work or in your personal life, and you came to me and and I get this a lot. I get a lot of teachers who come up to me about, a lot of teachers come up and tell me about either their personal lives and something's happening with their children at home, something that's happening in the classroom, and they're like, or even a relationship with an administrator or a coworker that's causing stress, and you become very emotional about that experience. So what if in that moment I said, "Oh, you're fine. You're okay. You're okay. Shh, shh, you're okay. You're okay. Here, let me show you. There's an app. Let me show you. Let me show you. There's an app. Look, 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 look. Here's an app. Look, 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 babe. Look at the app." I doubt that many people would tolerate that. And even if you tolerate it in the moment, you more than likely would. You more than likely would not come back to me. It's disrespectful, and it's not saying, "Hey, I hear you. I hear you. Oh my goodness, I hear what you are experiencing." Um, we don't always have the experience to say, I know what you're feeling. And it's not about you in that moment. It's not about you. You know, sometimes that happens too when, like, even an adult, they're experiencing, oh, yeah, that happened to me. Oh, yeah, I remember that. And we want to be helpful that way. But really, what a lot of folks, when we're experiencing that kind of sadness, is saying, we just need some comfort. We want to know that someone can hear us and someone that we can just kind of lean on. All right, so that's in an adult perspective, and we have to pay attention to that, because again, we are building neural pathways in the brain that become the foundation for how children will continue to experience the world even into their adulthood. This whole emotional state of being and all the experiences that move into becoming those foundations in our brains start when we're very young. And so we have to pay very close attention to the language we use, the approaches we take, and how we are in terms of our responsivity when children are feeling these big emotions. Now, having said that, when children are experiencing sadness, many adults are very uncomfortable with that. And this is especially true, I think, as the child gets older. See, we have a lot of tolerance, or just, I would say, higher tolerance with infants and toddlers, because part of the way that they communicate, for lack of a better way to communicate, is to cry. And so we can open our hearts a bit more and be much more emotionally, I guess, connected, not always in tune, but connected to what the child, or that the child is experiencing some sadness. As the child continues to get older, it requires more effort from the teacher oftentimes, and there are some children that will close it in and internalize those experiences. And so it requires a teacher to be open-hearted and to be really in tuned to the emotional state of being of a child or children. And what I mean by that is, far too often, older children, and I'm moving into now preschool, into kindergarten, first, second, third, and fourth, and beyond. I think what happens is we then shift at some point in that elementary ed, early childhood, we shift from the experience of waiting, like being in tuned to the child and really paying attention to their emotional state of being, how they're engaging, what they're saying, their facial expressions, their body language, all of those things that help us get to know who they truly are. And then when they move into that third and fourth grade and beyond, we then wait for children to express that to us, unless we have some extreme situations where a child might, their behavior might shift pretty considerably. That becomes noticeable. It requires a very in tune teacher to recognize that there is something going on, and it requires an in-tune teacher to be self-reflective of the relationship and how they can be present for the child. So let's talk more about being present for a child. When a child is feeling sadness, you have to really recognize whether you are feeling what you are feeling. Are you uncomfortable? And why are you uncomfortable? Part of being fully present for children is understanding your own triggers and what it is that you are experiencing. So if you had an experience or your upbringing where you were not given permission to cry, where you were being told that you were a crybaby, or big girls or big boys don't cry, or pull up your big panties, and be a big girl. It's like we have all of these sayings that we have to sort of shut down the experience of sadness. And so what happens is, often we become adults who then don't know what to do with sadness. And so sadness then manifests into other emotions, irritation, anxiety, anger, all resentment, and at the root of that is really feeling just sad. And oftentimes there's other emotions that might kind of ride along with that. And then sometimes what happens is we might eat or do something else so that we no longer have to feel the sadness or the pain that's often associated with sadness. So what we're trying to do is really become fully present for children. But if you are triggered by a child's sadness. And I see this a lot at the beginning of the school year with teachers who are annoyed when children continue to cry as they get to school in the morning from that home to school transition. I see children become, when children are upset, and I get teachers to say, she's still crying every day. She cries when her mom, and she knows everything's going to be okay. And we're talking about 2 and 3 and 4 weeks into the school year. And I think that if you've ever experienced any kind of homesickness or uncertainty about those transitions in life, new job, new place to live, new town, new city, new state, all of those emotions of, do I fit in? Am I going to be safe? Does this feel right for me? Is this a good experience that I'm about to enter upon? All of those things are elevated tenfold for a young child, and we have such low tolerance for that. Why do we have such low tolerance for that? Is it irritation because I was told at some point, be a big girl, that you're fine, you're okay. And that is one of the biggest things that I hear across all ages. So from infancy all the way up, I hear teachers say, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay. And I think that it's one of the disrespectful things that we say to children, because as an adult, if I was in a place of being sad or distressed for whatever reason, if someone else came to me and said, you're okay, you're okay. For me, it's like, apparently you don't hear what I'm saying, or you don't see how I am feeling right now, because in this moment, I am not okay. Now, it's not to say that I won't get to the place of being okay, but right now I am not okay. And that experience has to be honored. And so, because again, we're trying to teach children and build those foundations of safety. We want children to know how to be emotionally responsive and to be emotionally available. And so the way that we do that is being emotionally available. So remember, the first thing I said was, if you're triggered, why are you triggered? What is it within you that's irritated by children's sadness? The second thing is that sometimes when a child is sad, we don't know what to say. And if we say anything, we're afraid that the child's going to get even sadder or cry even more, or it's going to make the situation worse. And so we ignore the child. I have walked into many classrooms where a child is sitting in, maybe they have a safe place, and they're sitting in this safe place, or they're sitting in timeout, or they're sitting by themselves at a table, or they're sitting by themselves by the door. They're sitting somewhere or standing somewhere by themselves crying. And I know I work with kindergarten teachers, so there's one teacher and there's 25, 30 children in the classroom. I get it that it's really hard to attend to a child who might be having those an emotional experience. But it's important for children to know that you, as the pillar of strength, you as the person who is there to help keep them safe and help them feel connected, that you are there to provide that level of support to them, that you are emotionally available. And so I'll give you an example of what I've seen. I've seen classroom teachers, maybe let's say running a group time, or that they're doing an activity, a child is crying on the other side of the room. And many times I walk into the classroom and the teacher has the need to tell me why they've left a child over there. So they're like, oh, well, she doesn't want to come to circle time, or, she's a new child, or she stubbed her toe outside, or, whatever the reason is. And as a 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 7-year-old child, and I would say even an older child, the message that I want to convey to that person is that I am here for you. I am here for you, and I am doing my best to create a safe place for you to feel what you feel. And so we have to respect and honor that space. And so my very first go-to is the first moment I get. And even if I can't go in that moment, let's say I'm by myself in the classroom, I go over to the child and I come down to their level, and I get as close, I get in very close proximity, whatever's comfortable for the child. So you have to be able to gauge that and know children well, that the child who you're working with well. And you, with your whole heart open, you say, I am here. I am here. Right now, I need to, whatever, I need to go over to circle time. Would you like to sit next to me? Would you like to come with me? And or in a few moments, once I get the kids settled into doing whatever it is you're doing, I will be back to check on you, but I am here for you, so that they know they're not left alone in this situation. See, if you leave a child alone and there's a part of you that feels irritated or just like, oh, there she goes again, then that's about your frustration. And you've got to check that, because you're not being wholeheartedly, fully open and available to the child when you do that. And that's a really important thing to understand, that as early childhood professionals and even mothers and fathers, that our responsibility to children is to be open-hearted and to be available for them to feel these big emotions. Because the more often we squash it, the less often they will come to us. So these foundations are not only critical for that emotional development, but these little things become big things when they get older. And if you want children to come to you when they get older for the big things, you better be there for the little things. And so, and that means at the beginning of the school year as well, these little tiny things that might be children experience distress from, we have to really work at being emotionally available to children. Okay, so then the third thing, I think that was three, I talked about the third thing, I think it's the third thing. I'll probably listen to this and go like, that was the sixth thing. The other thing that happens, so we ignore the child, right? We ignore the child because we don't know what to do, or we don't want it to get worse. Okay. Other times is that, so we avoid, we try to distract, and we ignore. So that's what we do. And that's what I see very often. So let me tell you sort of what I do when I work with young children who are feeling sadness. I always think about, and this is true for just about everything I do in terms of social emotional development, I always think about, what is it that I hope to be able to be the model for the child? Like, what is it that I want them to learn from this experience and this engagement? And I don't mean it from a teacher place. I mean it from a heart place. I mean, I want my daughter, I'll say my daughter, for example, to know, to be able to be emotionally available to others, to be open-hearted, to allow people, give permission to others to feel what they feel, and that I'm going to honor that experience. It's actually what I call holding space. And so I'm going to honor that experience that you are having. That doesn't mean that I have to agree with what's happening, but that I'm going to honor that experience for you, because it's something that you are experiencing in this moment. So the very first thing, and I'm talking about all ages here, all ages. So I do this with the babies, and I do this all the way up, and I even do this with grown-ups. So a child is feeling sad, and I'll give you an example of what happens in just about every program I've ever been in. That drop-off time is a very difficult time. You get children who have a difficult time transitioning to school. So the very first thing, again, I'm going to tell you, you have to check yourself. Okay. What is it? Are you triggered? Are you irritated? All those things. You have to check yourself, because you have to own that. The child isn't creating that within you. That's a choice that we are making in that moment. And so we can choose differently. We can always choose differently. We can choose to see through the lens of love. And that is a choice that only you can make as a classroom teacher and as a parent. You can remember that he's not giving you a hard time, he is having a hard time. And to open your heart. So change the lens of irritation into, I can be the expression of love. Okay. I can be the pillar of strength. I am the pillar of strength. And so I become fully and completely present. And I get how hard it is to be present for a child and then still be able to manage and oversee the rest of the children. But in that moment, I come down to the child's level and I lean in and I said, you are feeling really sad right now. You really want to be with your mama. And your mama just left for work. I know you're feeling so sad right now. And so in that moment, I'm validating for the child that their emotions are real and that I hear them and that she has permission to feel that. And this permission piece is very, very, very important. And I don't mean like permission, but I mean permission. And let me explain that. I know too many grownups that are completely unavailable emotionally. Grown-ups who have a difficult time expressing love and receiving love. See, and a lot of us women are really good at extending love. We're really good at that. We're caregivers, we'll take care of. But we have a much more difficult time receiving love, being vulnerable, being the one to be taken care of. That is hard for many of us. And if you've ever experienced any kind of trauma or disconnect or difficult experiences in your childhood, or simply got messages of be a big girl, stop your crying, what's the matter with you? When we get those messages that way, that's not about the child. That's about the adult and their level of tolerance and discomfort around the feelings that the child is having. So the key here is to help the child, work through the experience. When we shut it down, the child doesn't then learn how to work through the experience. We have to move through an emotion. Okay. And when we don't move through emotions, and again, this is my experience with grown-ups, these emotions get squished down, squished down, squished down. And then they build and they build. And this is where we get resentment. And oftentimes there's fear wrapped up in there. And all of these messages that we get about feeling these big emotions and the discomfort people have around us, then we don't know how to express it. And so it manifests in lots of very unhealthy ways. And we have a very difficult time in relationships as a result. Relationships is like that, and interpersonal issues is one of the biggest things I get phone calls and emails about. And the truth of it is, a lot of that begins at the very, very early parts of our life. And so that's what we're trying to do, is help children develop these skills. So I think about what is it that I want the child to learn as a foundational experience. And so I key in and I validate, but that means that I am connected at the heart, and that it is never the responsibility of a child to reach out to an adult, a teacher, a parent. It is always the responsibility of the parent to reach out to the child, or to the teacher to reach out to the child to extend love. And far too often, even especially with older children, because we get triggered and we get annoyed by their behavior, and they become much more sophisticated, about how they see the world, and their language becomes much more irritable or irritating. And so we have to check our own lack of a better word, baggage, and why it is that we're irritated by that. As my daughter moves into adolescence, there are some things that she will say or that she will do that I'm going to interpret through my lens of my experience. And so I find this very fascinating. I'm gonna sidestep, of course, right? I'm gonna sidestep a little bit, because I've applied, I'm seeing things that I think happen a lot with older children and with grown-ups, especially around that idea of attitude and disrespect. Like, we have this perception that children are somehow being disrespectful or have attitude with us. And I'm learning as I watch older children try to make sense of the world, because that's what happens when they move from out of early childhood into this adolescence phase. They really start to try to figure things out. And you have to remember, it is a messy time in terms of their brain. There's all kinds of misfiring going on. The brain's reorganizing itself. There's lots of stuff happening at this time. And far too often we react because we are interpreting their words, their eye rolls. We're interpreting all that through our lens, through our experiences. And what I've learned, even with my own daughter, she'll say something and I'll be like, what was that tone? And then I'll realize that that the tone wasn't necessarily what she meant behind it. It's the way that I received it because of my own lens and my own experiences. And so sometimes we jump on children for reasons that really wasn't intended. And children and teachers will shut children down especially when they're older, because we have lower tolerance. It sounds disrespectful, but they're still trying to make sense of the world, and trying to figure out the language to use, the tone to use. There's all of this stuff that's happening, and if we came from a place of help, let me help them learn how to engage in a way that is respectful, that a way that that we can have a reciprocal relationship so that we can communicate effectively. If we come from a place of let me help you learn how to do that, and part of the way I do that is to model it, then we can understand that it's the process of learning without jumping into conclusions that the child should already know how to do this. So it's a really big thing. It's a big idea, but it really requires self-reflection and for you to understand why it irritates you. Too often we want to blame the child. He was so disrespectful. I can't believe what he said. I can't believe how he said that. Da, 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 da. And yeah, sometimes we move into that experience because that continues to be a repetitive pattern that appears, and then it becomes the dance that we've created as a parent, as a teacher. And so it's important for us to be self-reflective of my role in that instead of just blaming the child. Okay, so let me go back to the child who at drop off, and the child doesn't, and now I'm being fully present, right? And I say, you really want to be with your mama right now. Okay. Now I don't go into, she's going to be back later today. You do this every day. She comes back every day. You're okay. You're okay. I don't do that. What are the other things that might be said? I'm trying to think of, or we try to do the distracting thing as I shared before. And so I validate and then I'm present. And then I will tell you, this is something that teachers will sometimes do. Um, if you've implemented strategies for children to be able to move, and if you've had any training in conscious discipline or other trauma informed care, you know that deep breathing is a really important part of moving from the reptilian part of our brain stem, into the prefrontal cortex. And so the deep breathing is an important thing. Now, it isn't appropriate in most cases unless it's something that you have been practicing so much that it's a part of how we do our life at school, to then say, let's take a couple deep breaths. It really depends on who the child is. It depends on your relationship with the child. It depends on how, again, much this is a part of your classroom, everyday life experience. But what I do is I take those deep breaths. So I model that. And I take those deep belly breaths, 3 big belly breaths, and I'm fully present in that experience. Now, I'm not, this doesn't have to last 10 minutes. This can be done in a few minutes. But the first step is to say, you are feeling, or it seems to me like you might be feeling. That's the script that I prefer to use. It seems to me that you might be feeling sad right now. You're feeling really sad right now. Your mama left for work. And so, and the reason why, and I'm not even sure how, if this is what I said earlier in my little talk here, I do prefer saying you might be feeling. Now, the reason why I say might is because, again, it's an educated guess. I'm just going to make a guess here. Now, in conscious discipline, one of the things that they say is to describe what the child is experiencing, or what you see. So you have big tears coming down and your head is drooped and you are, sitting like this. And so you might be feeling, okay? So to describe that, to make the connection to this is what sadness looks like, okay? So the might piece is because it's an educated guess. Again, you can describe it. It sounds goofy in the beginning. You really feel like this just sounds stupid. But you do it and do it, and then it becomes your pattern, and you'll start to see the impact that it has, because it is pretty significant. And then the next part of that is to and then that you might be feeling. And the reason why I don't say you are sad right now, and again, I don't remember what I said initially, because it's that process of just remembering each time you say it, you might be feeling, is because feelings change. And when we say you are sad, it's too definitive. And why this is important is because sometimes we say to children, oh, you're so kind, you are so loving, you are so helpful. And you are so bad. You are just so bad. And what happens is children then start to go, those kids, especially that internalize those messages, they go, oh yeah, I'm always helpful. I am always. And then they become, grownups have a really hard time saying, hey, right now I really can't be helpful because I'm I'm stretched too thin. And so it becomes a part of their identity. And so we want children to recognize that these experiences that they are having are simply emotional states of being, and they're ebbs, and there's an ebb and flow to that. So they change. And in this moment right now, I am feeling. So go back again, get in touch with what it is I am experiencing if I'm being triggered. And then I am fully present. That means I open my heart. Means that I acknowledge what it is that the child might be experiencing and feeling, right? I take 3 deep breaths, or as many breaths that I can possibly take in that short duration of time. Still fully present. And sometimes I will tell you that sometimes when you say, you really want your mama right now, you really want your mama right now, they go, "Wah!" And you go, oh, that just made it worse. It does happen. It does happen. But how many times have you been like on the verge of like a meltdown and you've held it together? And see, we're ashamed of that. We're ashamed of feeling sadness. And for whatever reason, especially men, but women as well, we're ashamed of feeling that sadness. And so you're barely holding it together. And I know everyone has experienced that at one point in your life. You're barely holding it together, whether it's work or it's kids or it's personal stuff, whatever it is. It could be hormones. You're barely holding it together. And then what happens is somebody comes over and says, are you okay? And you're like, oh, and then you just like totally melt down. We've all had that experience, right? And so and then that person's like, whoa, I just asked you if you were okay. So it's like, I wasn't prepared for all of that, right? But the truth of it is, we have to move through the emotion, because when we squish it down, it becomes distress, which then releases cortisol. And then we stay in that reactive state of being, and it makes it difficult for us to work. It makes it nearly impossible to learn. And so all of those makes us sick, physically sick. And so these are habits that we really want children to have for the rest of their lives. But we have to be able to do it ourselves, quite honestly. Okay, so yes, that happens. A child will melt down sometimes, and then you'll think about me and go, "Oh, it just made it worse." No, you're allowing the child to move through the experience. Okay, and then again, you take the deep breaths, and now you transition the child. Now you guide them slowly into whatever it is that you are working on. Not from a place of distraction, though. Please honor that. Don't come from a place of, let me show you this. Look at how pretty this is. You just simply say, let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can find to do right now, or whatever it is that you're moving into. What I like to do, if I have the availability to do this, is I keep the child close to me. So if I'm at circle time, this is why I don't like assigned seating at circle time. You know, where they have like the little stickers or the little whatever at the circle time. I don't like that, or assigned desks or assigned seats, and I don't like that, because I want to be able to sit somewhere and kind of say, Johnny, come over, come, you can sit next to me. And as I'm talking to the rest of the children, I'm still being fully present and available. So and you can't see my arm, but I'm wrapping my arm around the child, or holding their hand. Even putting in, younger children, you wouldn't do this like a 12-year-old, 9, 10-year-old, but maybe a younger child, sit them in my lap, so that I can just, that I am being fully present, and I know that you are feeling sad right now. We have to get comfortable with the sadness that they're feeling, the big emotions that they're feeling, because it is nearly always our issue and not theirs. Please don't try to push them through the emotion. Please don't try to minimize it, using language like you're a big girl, or what's the matter with you, or why are you crying still. All of that is inappropriate, and I would never ever say that to my best friend. And if I wouldn't say that in my relationships, now some of you would, and I would say to you, don't do it. It's disrespectful, and it's not wholehearted, and it's not loving. And really, that's what we're trying to do, is create a more loving, peaceful experience of life. And so, anyhow, I'm trying to see if there's anything else. And then transition. Okay, and I am going to look to see. I'm on Zoom here, so I'm going to see if I have any questions. Oh my goodness, I've been speaking for 40 minutes. Sorry. I actually went on saying that I was only going to talk for for 10 minutes. That never happens, does it? I think I did pretty well on Week of the Young Child. But for topics like this, and sadness is something that we can definitely go on and
Sorry.
on
I
about.
actually went on saying that I was only going to talk for for
Oh,
10 minutes.
that's me. Sorry. Okay. So if there are any questions, I've got two folks on, I see. So if anybody has any questions about sadness, and this is a practice, especially because we are busy. We want to move through things quickly. I will tell you, I'm going to tell you a story here. Okay, I'll tell you a story, and we're going to move this into a podcast. So I'm just letting Regina or Marisa know that you can decide whether to add this or not add this to the story. But let me tell you. A story about a little boy. We went on a field trip to, I think it was Home Depot. We went on a field trip to Home Depot, and I had all of the kids I've worked with, are like 98% of the kids I've worked with, have some severe trauma that have a lot of the children have been in foster care, have been in circumstances where they had experienced abuse, neglect, or family members that just couldn't be fully present and emotionally engaged with their child. Those are just the kids I have always worked with. And so we were at Home Depot. We were going to build something, and field trips were something that I did quite a bit, because not only was it good for the educational experience and the connection to the project that we were working on, but it was always also significant because I wanted to help children learn how to be in at the store, and or a play, or like what are the social graces, what are the ways that we are when we are in an audience. We would go to plays, and what do you do, when do you clap, and do you hoot, do you howl, it's like how do we do that in the world. So we went to Home Depot, and we were at the end of the trip, and he was kind of starting to spiral out because it was just too overwhelming for him. And I knew that might be the case. So I did all this preventative stuff. Like he was with me the whole time. I connected with him throughout the course of the experience. I gave him some very specific jobs. And then all of a sudden it was like he hit his breaking point. And so the rest of the children, and as a group, one of the things that we worked on was being very respectfully aware of what each of us needed and how we supported each other. So when a child was in distress, children knew what to do because we talked about it, and every child needed something different. But we were at Lowe's, and so we had actually some volunteers and another teacher who took the other children, and they went and paid for everything, and went I know, probably stood up front somewhere, and the child was having a meltdown in the lumber area of Home Depot. Now, I'm with this kid, and so there's an assumption, of course, that the child might be my child. It's like, and I start to get the judgment stare, that parents get all the time. And in that experience of Lowe's, he's literally laying on the floor, and he is screaming and yelling, right? I mean, just like just out. Now, he isn't being aggressive in this moment. And this is a child who has a history of being aggressive. And so he often would take something and throw it across the room and break something. And that guy even tried to like attack adults, that kind of thing. And so in that moment, we're in the middle of Lowe's, and, or not Lowe's, Home Depot. And I'm sitting on the floor, and I'm taking deep breaths. And I have learned by this point in my career that judgment doesn't serve anyone. So you can continue to look at me and snicker and make all these comments, and I'm going to be okay with that, because you get to own that experience. You don't know all of the story. You don't need to know all of the story. So you get to see through the lens of your life experience and make your judgment. And that's fine. That's fine. I can completely, so that part I was aware of, but wasn't engaged emotionally in that experience. So I took a couple deep breaths, and it's so often where we want to just go quick, like, hurry up and get. And I've seen this so many times. We get embarrassed, we get irritated. This has happened. The kid's screaming, everybody in Home Depot can hear him. And I'm taking a couple, and I'm sitting on the floor with him, and I'm simply being present for him. And I say to him, because remember, when a child is in this place of distress, when they are sad, when they are crying, when they're screaming and all that, they're in the reptilian part of the brain, which means that their brain is now offline. They're not their whole brain, but their prefrontal cortex is offline. So if you sit there and say, well, if you get up and you stop crying, then I'm going to give you a special treat when you go to the bus. Or if you stop doing that, if we don't get to school back in time, we're not going to get to do this. It's like when we do that kind of crap, that's not helpful to the child. And so what he needed right there is just for me to be fully aware and fully engaged and fully responsive to his emotional need in that moment. So I took a couple deep breaths and I simply said something I just simply said, I'm getting tired. I simply said, you're feeling really tired right now. I know this sometimes these kinds of trips can feel pretty hard. And he rolled over because he was, crying. And that's when he was starting to now move into the emotional state of being right there. He was starting to move out of what I call the freak out place. He's starting to move into this place. And he rolled over and he looked at me and he nodded. And he just needed a moment. And instead of me saying, we're going to be late, or why are you acting like this? Or come on, let's get up and go. Instead of me trying to push through that very, very quickly, I simply put my hand out and I looked at him in those eyes that you really open your heart, because there are eye contact is powerful. You've heard me say that. And so the eyes of open hearted is very different than the eyes that you are irritating the crap out of me right now and you need to pull your crap together. There's a different experience from that. And I simply just looked at him very wholeheartedly and put my hand out. I didn't attempt to touch him or anything like that. And he pulled his hand and he held on to my hand. And I started to take deep breaths with him. And I just tried to tune into him. When he was ready to get up, he sat up. And then I made myself available if he needed a hug, if he needed to sit in my lap. And as people are walking by, they're staring at this experience, again, probably making judgment. But what is most important is to be fully present for the child. And so I ended up sitting there and rocking. And one of the things that I used to do quite a bit as a classroom teacher, and yeah, I worked with kindergarten kiddos, so these, pretty big kids. And I would do "You Are My Sunshine," but I changed the words because I don't like "You Make Me Feel," because I think it's a bad lesson that anyone can make you feel anything without your consent. And so I changed the words, but "You Are My Sunshine" is something that I hummed quite a bit to children, or would sing that. And so I did that in the middle of Home Depot, rocking this child. So that experience of being fully and completely in tune to children is something you have to work at. And if it's something that you didn't get as a child because someone told you to shut your feelings down, it could have been a teacher, it could have been a parent, it could have been a lot of people. If you were embarrassed by being emotional, expressing sadness or tears, if you just didn't get the emotional connection and felt safe enough to be able to express yourself from that place, then this might be very difficult for you. I didn't get that as a kid. I didn't get any. I got pockets of it from other family members, but definitely not from my mom. And that's oftentimes, not always, men are very, very good at this, or can be very, very good at this as well. But in my circumstance, that would have been my person, and she was not able to do that because of her own upbringing and her own emotional disconnect. And so I had to learn this as a grown up. I had to learn how to move into this space by intentionally practicing what felt very uncomfortable for me. And I practiced and I practiced and I practiced and I practiced. And when it was easier for me to say, "Stop it, stop your crying," when it was easier for me to say, "I don't want to hear it right now, walk away from me," when it was easier for me to neglect the situation that was happening because of my level of discomfort, I pushed and moved into that experience and became fully present with the child and recognized that that was my issue and it wasn't the child's. And so if this is you, I wish you well, and I challenge you. I hope that you are willing to take this challenge as an experience that could really change your life. So it's not changing the lives of children, but really changing your life as well. Because what happens is when you become emotionally in tune to yourself, you start to really live in alignment with what you believe and what you feel. And that, I think, is our quest and our journey into peace and happiness and all of those joyful experiences that we all are looking for, having more in our life. So, having said all that, I appreciate that you are here. And yeah, reach out to us if you have any questions about this, and I'm more than willing to answer any questions. So, thank you all very much. Have a good night.